Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Quint. You're watching a special interaction with Lupin Management after the earnings were out yesterday evening. Uh, I have joining me Ramesh Swaminathan, who is the Executive Director and Chief Financial Officer at Lupin. Ramesh, it's a pleasure to talking to you again. Let me begin with your numbers are pretty much in line with Street, but your EBITDA was little disappointing. Where do you see your EBITDA stabilizing?
Okay. If you look at the last 5 quarters, so to speak, so if you go back in time, we were obviously at the 22% level, but in the last few years, we have been a little lower. And that, in 2020, we actually reached a low. But since then, we actually crept up. It went up from 14.6 to 16 to 18.6 to 18.8 and so on. Even when we started the year, we were fairly confident of, in fact, pretty good results. But then a few things happened. The first thing was essentially famotidine brought in a lot more. There was a lot more competition. Two more competitors came in. The second thing that actually happened was the fact that albuterol, we were used to go in for spot selling, which at much higher prices. It went in for longer term contracts and actually brought in its wake, in fact, lower realizations as well. There's an element of FTS, so to speak. And of course, there was an accounting, the way we actually accounted for partnered products. All this actually meant the gross margins came down a little lower. In terms of our overall EBITDA margins, whilst we expected it to be high because of these reasons in gross margins, it came down to be lower in Q1. And we guided for, in fact, Q2 to be a pretty tough quarter. And it is in line with that particular guidance itself. Our overall endeavors when it comes to, in fact, shoring up our gross margins and other initiatives, be it procurement excellence, be it routes to synthesis, be it the various initiatives on the SG&A, all of these are certainly, are still, still work in progress and going very well. We expect the gross margins as well as the overall EBITDA margins to creep up. I can't give a guidance at this stage, but it will certainly be, increasing over the next couple of quarters, perhaps 1.5% every quarter, the next couple of quarters, and perhaps over the next 4 or 5 quarters, you would expect it to get to the normalized levels of 20-22%. It is going to be over time, but it's not going to be overnight.
I know you had at the end of Q1 given a guidance that your margins will be around 16 to 17% odd for FY22. But do you expect the second half to bring in that kind of lever your margin? Because one, you also mentioned that you've gone for long-term contracts for albuterol. That would be at a slightly lower pricing as compared to what you were selling earlier. Because earlier in the spot market the prices were higher, and you're trying to get a market share there. So at the cost of margins there.
The EBITDA margins, as I was just telling you, will certainly go up in the quarters to come. It is certainly going to be higher in Q3 and Q4. For the year, it will be certainly, it'll be better than where it is today. And as I say, it will certainly go up over the next several quarters as we actually normalize several things. We are going on for restructuring of a lot of stuff. For example, we have restructured our entire specialty business. So the overall burn associated with that is going to be lower. We're looking at restructuring our NCE business itself, spinning it off into a separate company and the like. So all of this will certainly bear fruit. We are working on a host of other initiatives. With all of this coming in place, we do expect margins to kind of normalize to the 20-22% over the next several quarters, so to speak. This is in line with, in fact, the competition. In terms of, this will obviously take its time, as I would say, and you'll have to bear with us for that.
Okay, you mentioned the fact that the pressure was coming from some of your base portfolio, famotidine pricing coming down, new competitors coming in there. Do you see margins for famotidine stabilizing, or do you see further pressure coming in that market for you?
Famotidine, we were the only generic player, and there was further competition coming in. But we've also seen tremendous price pressure across various products in the US markets. This is, if you look at the historical past, gross margins were steady for a period of time, but it went, there was steep fall. The realizations, there was, in fact, the overall realizations came down for quite a few products. Even in quarter one, in fact, the price erosion was there. it impacted the rest of the industry as well. It was in the high single digits, so to speak, even for us that way, and that was reflected, in fact, in lowering of gross margins. And more importantly, I think what's happening today is that there has been tremendous material price increases. There's a lot of pressure on that. Prices have gone up in across all companies, all sectors, and the pharmaceutical sector is no exception, really. So a lot of KSM's imports from China have been impacted. A lot of the bulk drugs also, if we speak about imports from China, and that's true with not merely us. It's going to be true with the competition as well. Those pressures are on. So that is certainly going to impact in some ways. It really depends on how we really manage it. We manage it particularly well in the first half because we had inventories. We also had entered into confirmed purchase orders and the like. But going forward, it's something which is going to impact the industry, and we're conscious of that.
Mm-hmm. So, if I were to ask you to look at the entire US market, how is it doing for you? Do you see the pricing pressure, which not only you but others are also facing along with you in the industry? Where do you see that pressure, flattening out for you guys? Because there is a lot of pressure coming in for US generics in terms of pricing, and you yourself mentioned that raw material is becoming a additional burden on the margins going forward for you and in the industry there. So how are you handling these two key events actually?
Yeah, I think what you are saying is absolutely true. One part of the story, of course, is the fact that there are lowering of prices. So there is price erosion. The other part is, of course, the fact that input prices are increasing all out. And to the extent we are all impacted by that. How do we manage that is indeed the difficult thing, and it's actually reflected in our results in some ways. The gross margin pressure is there to see, for people to see, even in Q2. So how do we manage that? Essentially by looking at alternate supplies and the like. Getting into more differentiated products, which brings in better realizations. And if you speak for Lupin itself, the number of platforms that we have entered into is perhaps the highest in the industry. Places where, in fact, there's a lot more stability, and there I associate, in fact, with firstly, the respiratory portfolio, the complex injectables piece. We're there into biosimilars, and we're hoping to make a big entry in the market with GCS next year. So all of this will certainly differentiated products, and of course, we have not forgotten our specialty intentions as well. All of this will certainly help in bringing out a characterization of the business which is different, but this will happen over time.
Okay. I also want you to dwell some bit on two key things that happened in this quarter. One is the settlement of the lawsuit which happened, Glumetza, 1879 crores, which you have provided for. When do you expect this entire thing to get over and start? While you have provided it in Q2, when do you see the conclusion on payments getting done? It is also going to put in some strain on your cashes because you are currently net cash, but once you make those payments, you will be again in growth. And what kind of cash flow you see over the next 1 or 2 years coming from your operations?
Yeah. So, if you look at this quarter, you talked about special events, so to speak. There are two of those. The first was, of course, as you correctly mentioned, was the settlement. This is done, in fact, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago. This is in line with what we thought was the best strategy for the company. This is essentially led by the fact that, in fact, the other innovator company, which was the field in the fray for similar litigation, they actually settled with, in fact, the litigators. And given the fact that we wanted to kind of bring down the overall risk, mitigate the risk associated with that, we also settled. It is one time. The results of this have been taken into account in the financial, the results that we reported. There's no more to it than that. Insofar as the overall cash is concerned, we are, it's a question of time before we pay it out. It's going to be over the next 1 month or so. It is certainly going to impact the overall cash position, so to speak. But you would also recognize that we are financially a very strong company. Our net worth is what it is, so it doesn't it impacts us, but it's not as though it's going to move the needle too much. And given the steadier cash flows that will accrue to the company, we'll certainly get over it. That's the first part. The second, we did decide for good reasons to take an impairment of our Solosec IP, so to speak. As you know, we actually entered into this market about 3-4 years ago. We had created a lot of product awareness. We had also created a lot of non-person promotions, especially during the COVID times, because that's what the market called for. It was a very tough call from our perspective, and we also thought that it will be abundantly prudent on our part to take this call, because the outcomes coming in from this particular IP were not commensurate with the efforts and so on, and the costs associated with that. And to the extent we decided to actually prune down that. We are still going to promote the product, but this is more coming in from non-person promotions. We are not exited the business; it's still very much with us, and we believe in the long-term future of, in fact, a specialty business. But we're taking this in the interest of caution and prudence.
So when do you see, specialty business coming back in a big way for you? Because you're trying to cut your cash burn. I understand that because that's impacting your margins as well. But do you see a better growth rate for the specialty business, especially in the US, as we go along, or is it going to be a slow build up instead of pushing a lot of cash into that business currently?
I like the words that you use. That's actually going to be a slow build up. The fact is, this business is something that requires a cashier of products, and that's, I think, is what our realization has been. So, so we would obviously have a lot of interest in this, and so we've not lost our faith or interest in this in specialty business, or for that matter, the women's healthcare business itself. But we are taking, as I would say, some breathing space, so to speak, in this. But we'll be back. It is going to be baby steps in the days to come, and we would obviously be a little more calibrated in our efforts when it comes to M&A or any other endeavors. We're also spending monies in trying to build this business organically, in terms of a research pipeline and the like. And we're fairly confident that it will also bear fruit over the quarters to come. But I would not like to be guilty of actually, of conjecturing on the results of this at this stage, and you would rather wait for this to pan out and prove itself.
So, you also mentioned the fact that you're looking at monetizing some of your assets, especially Lupin Oncology and biosimilars. What kind of timeline that you have for that monetization? Is there a valuation that you're looking at for these businesses?
Not so much on the biosimilars at this stage. It is at this stage, in the backburner stage. Whilst in the case of specialty, we've already done that. On the NCE front, we're taking active steps to kind of monetize that from a spin-out perspective. But all of this is still in the works, and I would be guilty of actually jumping the gun if I were to go ahead and make statements of this kind, to you at this stage.
So, I just wanted to get a sense of it, whether you want to bring in, hive off it as a separate subsidiary and get in a strategic partner for that, or you want to demerge it and list it separately and make it a different balance sheet?
It is various, the plans are still, being finalized. It's not as though it's, the framework is still evolving. But the way we see it is, we would take it at least off of financials in some way, so that the burn is not really reflected when it comes to the EBITDA margins.
Mm-hmm. You had guided for around 9% of your sales for R&D, if I'm not wrong. Are you on course to maintain that kind of run rate for your R&D? Because this quarter, I think it was around 8.2 or something.
Yes, it was 8.2. We have taken a lot of steps in actually bringing up the productivity, as well as taking the right steps in terms of prioritizing on our spends on various molecules and on various initiatives. All of this has borne fruit. So it was, it has come down by 1.5% over over the last couple of quarters, but it is going to be in the 8.5% range going forward.
Okay.
With NCE's restructuring, it could actually tend to be a little lower.
Okay. One of a few key triggers which the market is looking at is some of the launches that you have lined up. Spiriva and Dulera. These are the two which are expected in FY22 and FY23. Do we have any update on those two launches?
We have a number of products lined up for the future. Starting with, in fact, Suprep, which is going to come from, in fact, Somerset stable, our portfolio of products in America itself. Then we have PEG GCSF coming in from our biosimilars portfolio. That's again slated for next year. Next year, towards the second half, you are certainly looking at least another big launch in terms of Spiriva, the handle format. And to that extent, we are also gung ho about the next year. I would not like to conjecture on the total the difference that it makes to our total turnover in America, but for sure, at least there's a pretty good products to have in our stable. The differentiated products, and to that extent, you'd expect things to be a little different in terms of outcomes.
What about Foster launch? I mean, so you're trying to look at a UK launch for that in FY22.
We've already launched that. The lower strength, the higher strength will come in over the next few quarters. So it's doing well. It's actually showing up. It's coming up pretty well. Lufobec is the name of the brand that we have launched out there. And we are fairly confident about its prospects over the next several quarters in the UK for sure.
Mm-hmm. I have a few more questions. One is on some of the manufacturing sites which are under official action indicated. Have you heard anything from the US FDA on those manufacturing sites? Where are we on remedial, if there is any action at all on it?
I'll take this in two parts. As you know, that a number of our facilities are under OAI. So I would distinguish this between, in fact, our state of preparedness in India and perhaps Somerset. Somerset was, of course, a disappointment, but that's a different, that's a different story that we should be talking about. When it comes to India, I think the state of preparedness is very high. We are indeed a little disappointed in the number of observations that we've seen for Goa, but by no means is that actually an indication of the work that has gone in, or for that matter, we are very confident about the overall outcomes given, the responses that you have given to the regulators. We've all answered all their questions, and we are hopeful that we'll get a good response. Equally, we are fairly confident about, in fact, the way we have gone about our preparations when it comes to, in fact, the other sites in India, when it comes, most importantly, Tarapur, which is extremely important from an API supply perspective. We also have the warning letters in the OSD facility at Pithampur and Mandideep. All of this will get addressed over time, as in when the FDA decides to come to India to kind of look at these facilities. So our state of preparedness is, of course, is what is giving us this conviction, and hopefully it'll be the way I see it.
Mm-hmm. A couple of questions on the domestic market. India business fell around 5.7% quarter on quarter for you. What was the reason for that?
First quarter was a great quarter, especially when it comes to the acute therapy. And this is true, in fact, the rest of the industry as well. Acute therapy has, did take a beating when it came to the whole of last year, and to that extent, this quarter and the last couple of quarters have been fairly decent for it. Our growth rates, both on the acute therapy as well as chronic therapy, have been, in fact, higher than that of the industry growth rates. We are very bullish about our overall prospects in India when it comes to both acute and chronic, more of chronic, so to speak. And I'm sure we will be will come out pretty good here.
Mm-hmm. And do you expect the growth coming back to India? Was it a one-off quarter for that in that sense?
No, I think the growth has always been pretty good. So there's been no degrowth, or it's only vis-a-vis the previous quarter, so to speak. But otherwise, I think the growth is fairly good in India. There's no questions about it.
Okay. You're also looking at getting into the diagnostic business. I just wanted to get a rationale of a pharmaceutical company getting into a diagnostic segment. Is it going to be a separate arm of yours, or what kind of investments you're looking at, and why diagnostics?
I would like to rush to add that what we are doing right now is taking baby steps in the direction of diagnostics. We see that there is, of course, some adjacencies that are which are well-meaning in this particular market, given the fact that we would like to position ourselves as a healthcare company over time. So it is a very useful adjacency to get into. It gives us a very differentiated offering when it comes to, in fact, our customers and, of course, the doctors. The way we see it, it's not, the capital allocation for this is going to be very well calibrated. It's not going to be humongous. It is not going to be the main story when it comes to India, but for sure we have got into it, and we believe it is something which will actually do well over time. But as I said, it's going to be calibrated aggression of that matter, allocation of capital over time. It's never going to be a humongous.
Don't you see this market being overcrowded in that sense? Because we have a lot of standalone diagnostic centers and chains which are already there in this market.
Yes, you're right. It's a hugely fragmented market, and therein lies, in fact, the prospects also. Less than 16% of this market is actually, is belonging to the organized sector, and things could be very different over time. And we wanted to actually get in there from that perspective and offer something which is very differentiated, at the same time very needed for this market.
So, is there a timeline of in the next 5 years where do you want to build up this business up to?
As I said, it's going to be baby steps. It is the capital allocation would be decided on the way things pan out. So it's going to be a wait and watch and see how we can grow this business.
Ramesh, it's been a pleasure talking to you always. Thank you very much for joining us on Bloomberg.
My pleasure too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.